What would happen if you didn't spend a single dollar for 22 hours? No coffee, no food delivery, no online shopping, nothing. It sounds simple, almost too simple. But if you really think about it, when was the last time you went an entirely day without spending money? Not just big purchases, small ones, the ones that you don't even think about. A drink, a snack, a quick order online, something you saw for a few seconds and decided to buy. It happens so easily, so you barely notice it, because spending money today doesn't feel like a decision anymore. It feels like a habit. You don't plan it, you don't question it, you just do it. And most of the time, it's not because you need something, it's because you want something right now. Or sometimes because you feel something, bored, stressed, tired, restless, and without thinking, you reach for the easiest solution. Buy something, it's fast, it's convenient, and for a moment it feels good. But that feeling doesn't last, so you do it again and again. Until spending becomes part of your daily routine, just like checking your phone or scrolling through content. So what happens when you suddenly stop? Not forever, just for one day. No purchases, no quick fixes, no just this once. At first, nothing seems different, but very quickly, something starts to change. You begin to notice how often you almost spend money. Moments where your hands reaches for your phone, times when you feel the urge to buy something without a real reason. And in this moment, something becomes clear. You are not just spending money, you are reacting. In this video, we are going to explore what really happens during those 24 hours. From the automatic habits you don't even realize you have, to the uncomfortable moments where you feel the urge to spend, to the deeper realization about what you actually need and what you've been chasing without noticing. Because this isn't just about money, it's about behavior, it's about awareness, and it's about understanding why you buy things, even when you don't need them. And once you see that clearly, you may never look at spending the same way again. What would happen if you didn't spend a single dollar for 24 hours? No coffee, no food delivery, no online shopping, nothing. It sounds simple, but almost too simple. But if you really think about it, when was the last time you went an entirely day without spending money? Not just big purchases, small ones, the ones you don't even think about. A drink, a snack, a quick order online, something you saw for a few seconds and decided to buy. It happens so easily, so you barely notice it, because spending money today doesn't feel like a decision anymore. It's like a habit. You don't plan it, you don't question it, you just do it. And most of the time, it's not because you need something, it's because you want something right now. Because you feel something, bored, stressed, tired, restless, and without thinking, you reach for the easiest solution: buy something. It's fast, it's convenient, and for a moment, it feels good. But that feeling doesn't last. So, you do it again and again, until spending becomes part of your daily routine, just like checking your phone or scrolling through content. So what happens when you suddenly stop? Not forever, just for one day. No purchases, no quick fixes, no just this once. At first, nothing seems different, but very quickly, something starts to change. You begin to notice how often you almost spend money. Moments where your hands reaches for your phone, times when you feel the urge to buy something without a real reason. And in those moments, something becomes clear. You're not just spending money, you are reacting. In this video, we are going to explore what really happens during those 24 hours. From the automatic habits you don't even realize you have, to the uncomfortable moments where you feel the urge to spend, to the deeper realization about what you actually need and what you've been chasing without noticing. Because this isn't just about money, it's about behavior, it's about awareness, and it's about understanding why you buy things even when you don't need them. And once you see that clearly, you may never look at spending the same way again. The morning is where your habits are the strongest, Not because you are making conscious decisions, but because you are not thinking at all. You wake up, your body moves almost automatically. Same routine, same steps, same patterns you followed for days, months, even years. And hidden inside that routine are small moments of spending you barely notice. Maybe it's coffee, you don't stop to ask if you need it, you just get it. It's part of how your day starts. The smell, the taste, the feeling of holding in your hand. It feels normal, expected, almost necessary. But today you don't buy it, and suddenly something falls off. Not physically, but mentally. It's like a small part of your routine is missing. Then comes the breakfast. Maybe you usually grab something on the way, something quick, convenient, something that saves time. But now you have to think, do you already have the food at home? Can you make something instead? It takes a little more effort, a little more awareness, and that's when you begin to notice something important. Most of your morning spending isn't about necessity. It's all about convenience. It's about making things easier, faster, more comfortable. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when inconvenience become automatic, it turns into dependency. You stop questioning it, you stop noticing it, and over time it becomes part of who you are. I need coffee to start my day. I don't have time to cook. I'll just grab something quickly. These aren't decisions anymore. They are identities. But today challenges that. Because when you remove spending, even temporarily, you forced to face those assumptions. Do you really need that coffee? Or have you just forgotten, or you just gotten used to it? Do you really not have time? Or have you just chosen the easier option so many times that it feels like the only option? As the morning routines, you start to see more of these patterns, small moments where your instinct is to spend a drink, a snack, something quick and easy. And each time you pause, not because it's difficult to stop, but because you're finally aware of it. And that awareness changes how the moment feels. What used to be automatic now feels like a choice. What used to happen without thinking now requires a decision. And in that decision, something shifts. You begin to realize that your routine isn't fixed, it's built step by step, habit by habit, choice by choice. And many of those choices were never really choices at all. Just patterns you followed without noticing. By the end of the morning, one thing becomes clear. You don't just spend money out of need, you spend it out of habit. And habits are much harder to see until you try to break them. By the time midday arrives, something subtle starts to change inside you. The morning routine is gone. The structure of waking up, getting ready, and starting the day has passed. And now, there is space, empty space. And in that space, your mind starts to wander. This is where cravings begin. Not physically hunger, not real necessity, but something quieter, more constant. The urge is to spend. It often starts without warning. You're scrolling your phone, you're just checking something, just passing time, and suddenly you see something, a product, a recommendation, a video that feels perfectly timed, or a discount that looks too good to ignore. And in that split second, something in your mind reacts. It's not a decision, it's an impulse, a tiny spark that says, maybe I should get this. And what's interesting is you don't even need it. You weren't thinking about it before. You didn't plan for it. But now, for a brief moment, it feels important. This is how modern spending works. It doesn't wait for need, it waits for attention. And once it has your attention, it starts building desire. You imagine owning it. You imagine how it might improve your day, how it might make you feel different, slightly better, slightly happier, slightly more complete. But the truth is that feeling is extremely short. Because what you are actually chasing is not the product itself, is the emotion attached to it. The idea of change, the idea of reward, the idea of something new, breaking the routine, and that's where the danger lies. Because once your mind learns that feeling better is only click away, it starts to reach for it automatically, without thinking, without questioning, without pausing. Normally, you would act on it. A few taps, a quick checkout, a small purchase that doesn't feel significant in the moment. But today is different. Today there's a rule, no spending. And that rule creates friction. For the first time, there's a gap between impulse and action. You see the urge, you don't follow it, and in that gap, something very important happens. Awareness. You begin to notice how often these impulses appear, not once, not twice, but repeatedly throughout the day. Each one small enough to ignore, but frequent enough to shape your behavior. And you start to realize something uncomfortable. Most of these urges are not about need. They're about stimulation. Your brain is not asking, do I need this? It is asking, what will I feel? I get this. And that shift from needing to feeling is exactly what makes impulse spending so powerful. Because feelings are immediate, they are not emotional, they don't require logic, and that makes them easy to follow. But when you stop yourself, even just once, you begin to see the pattern behind it all, the trigger, the emotion, the imagined reward, and then the silence after it passes, because like all impulses, it fades quickly. Sometimes in the seconds, sometimes in minutes, but it always fades. And when it does, you're left with clarity, not desire, just awareness. And this is this first time today that you start to see spending not an action, but as reaction. By the afternoon, something different begins to set in. It's not urgency, it's not craving like before, it's something quieter, more dangerous in a way, boredom. This is the moment most people don't notice, but it's actually one of the strongest triggers for spending. Because when your mind has nothing to focus on, it starts looking for stimulation. And in today's world, stimulation is everywhere. Your phone becomes the easiest escape, a quick scroll, a quick tap, a quick distraction from the feeling of nothing happening. And that's when it begins. You open an app without thinking, just for a second, just to check, just to pass time, but the algorithm is ready. It knows what to show you, something new, something interesting, something that feels like it was made for you. A product you didn't know existed, a deal you didn't know needed. And suddenly, boredom turns into interest. Interest turns into desire. And desire turns into a familiar thought. I could buy this. Not because you need it, not because it gives you your mind something to do, but something to feel, something to break the emptiness. This is the hidden psychology of afternoon spending. It's not about solving a problem, it's about escaping a feeling. And the feeling is usually simple. I don't know what to do right now. So your brain reaches for the faster solution. It knows. Consumption. Because consumption feels like action. It feels like progress. It feels like change, even when nothing actually changes. But today is different. Today, you don't act on it. And that observation is uncomfortable at first because boredom comes louder. When you don't escape it, you notice how often you normally feel these gaps. A snack, a drink, a small online purchase, a random item added to a cart, not because you need, but because of the time, because of emotion, because of emptiness. And when you remove all of that, you are left with something you're not used to anymore. Stillness. At first, it feels strange, almost like something is missing. But slowly, that stillness starts to change. You begin to notice things again, small detail, your thoughts, your environment, your own reactions. And in that space, a realization starts forming. Most spending in the afternoon is not planned. It is emotional, reactive. It is the response to boredom disguised as desire. And once you see that clearly, the urge doesn't disappear, but it weakens. Because now you can recognize it for what it is, not a need, not a necessity, but a distraction. And that awareness changes everything about how you experience the rest of the day. Because for the first time, you're not just trying to fill time, you're not actually living inside it. By the time evening arrives, the energy of the day starts to shift again. The pace slows down, people finish work, finish school, finish their responsibilities, and now a different kind of pressure begins to appear. Not internal this time, but social. This is the moment when spending often stops being about boredom or impulse and starts becoming about belonging. You check your phone, messages start coming in, let's go eat something, wanna hang out, order something together. On the surface, it sounds simple, but just a normal social activity. But underneath it, there is always spending involved. A meal, a drink, a ride, a plan that costs something. And suddenly, you are faced with a quiet decision. Do you join in? Or do you stick to your rule? Because saying yes usually means spending money, but saying no doesn't mean missing an activity. It can feel like missing out on connection. This is where lifestyle spending becomes powerful, because it is no longer just about what you want. It is about what others are doing and what you feel you should be doing too. Even without pressure from anyone directly, you still feel it internally. The idea that this is what people do at this time of day, go out, eat out, spending together, share experiences, and when you step back from spending, even for one day, you start to notice how many of these social moments are built around consumption. Not conversation, not connection, but activity that costs money. And that realization feels like a little comfortable, because it raises the question, if you remove spending from these moments, what is actually left? The people or the habit of doing things together? Tonight, you observe something clearly for the first time. Spending is not always personal. Sometimes it is social. Sometimes it is about fitting in, about not being the only one who says so, about not being the one who breaks the pattern. And in that moment, you understand something important. Money is not just used for products. It is often used for participation, for belonging, for feeling included in something bigger than yourself. And when you remove it, even temporarily, you don't just change your habits, you change how you interact with the world around you. And that can feel both feel freeing and slightly isolating at the same time. By now, something important has started to shift in your mind. The day is not just about avoiding spending anymore. It has become something deeper. A quiet comparison is forming in your thoughts between what you actually need and what you've been calling need for a long time. And the more you observe your day without spending, the clearer that difference becomes. You start with the basics: food, water, shelter, rest. These are real needs. They don't change. They don't depend on mood. They don't require marketing or persuasion. They simply exist. But as you move through the day, you begin to notice how rarely is your spending is connected to these bases. Most of it lies somewhere else, in convenience, in comfort, in emotion, in habit. You think back to in the morning, the coffee, was it a need or just a way to start the day in a familiar way? You think about midday, the snacks, the quick purchases, were they necessary or just responses to your moment of attention? And then the evening, social plans, eating out, ordering something together. Was it about survival or about experience? And slowly the line becomes clearer. Needs are stable, wants are flexible, but in daily life they often get mixed together. So much that you stop seeing the difference. You start saying things like, I need this coffee to function. I need this upgrade. I need this delivery because I'm too tired. But when you step away from spending for just one day, you start to hear those sentences differently. They don't feel as absolute anymore. They feel like explanation, not truths. Not truths. And that realization can be uncomfortable because it means many of your needs are actually shaped by routine, by environment, by repetition, by what you've been told is normal. And once something feels normal enough, it starts to feel necessary. This is where modern consumption becomes powerful. It doesn't just sell you products, it reshapes your definition of need slowly, quietly, consistently, until what used to be a want starts to feel like something you cannot live without. But today interrupts that pattern because without spending, there's no immediate way to satisfy every impulse. So instead, you wait, you observe, you let the feeling pass, and in that space between impulse and action, you start to understand something important. Not every desire deserves a response, not every feeling needs a solution, and not every want is as urgent as it appears. Some wants are just moments. They rise quickly, they feel intense, but they disappear just as fast. And when you don't act on them, you see their true nature, temporary, not essential, not life-changing, just passing thoughts dressed as urgency. And this is the key difference you begin to understand. Needs support your life, wants decorate that. But somewhere along the way, you started treating decoration as a necessity, and that is exactly what this 24-hour experiment reveals. Not a lack, not a restriction, but a reordering of perspective. Because when you remove spending, you don't lose anything essential. You only start to see what was never essential in the first place. By now, something deeper is happening than just observation. You are no longer only noticing your habits. You are starting to understand the system behind them. Because spending money was never just a simple action, it was a loop. A psychological loop that repeats itself quietly in that everyday life. It starts with a trigger, a moment of boredom, a notification, a scroll through your phone, a flash of something interesting, a discount, a product. Something designed to catch your attention in less than a second, and it works. Your brain reacts instantly, not with logic, but with emotion. A small signal appears, this looks good, I might need this, I should check it out. That is the beginning in the loop. Then comes the anticipation. You imagine owning it, using it, experiencing it. You picture how it might slightly improve your day, how it might change your mood, how it might make things feel different. And in that moment, your brain is already releasing a sense of expectation, not satisfaction yet, just anticipation. And that anticipation is powerful because it feels like something good is about to happen. Then comes the action, a click, a tap, a quick decision, a purchase. It happens fast, almost too fast to fully register. And in that instant, there is a relief, a small hit of satisfaction, a feeling of completion, like something has been resolved. But here is where the loop becomes interesting. That feeling is short, very short. It fades quickly, sometimes within minutes, sometimes within seconds. And once it fades, your brain starts looking for the next trigger because it has learned something. Spending leads to a feeling. So it starts searching for opportunities to repeat it. This is the dopamine loop. Trigger, anticipation, action, reward, and repeat. And over time, it becomes automatic. You don't need a big reason. You don't need a real problem. You just need a moment, a gap, a feeling, something small enough to activate the circle again. But today, something interrupts that loop because you are not allowed to complete it. Because you are not allowed. You see the trigger, you don't act. You feel the anticipation, but it has nowhere to go. You experience the urge, but it stops at awareness. And that interruption is powerful because for the first time, you see the loop without being inside it. You notice how quickly it starts, how naturally it builds, how often it appears throughout the day, and most importantly, how little it actually gives you in return. Because when you remove the action, you realize the reward was never as strong as anticipation. The feeling of getting something is often bigger in your mind than in reality. And that gap between expectation and experience is where modern spending lives, not in need, not in survival, but in repetition, in emotional circles, in habits that feel rewarding but fade almost immediately. And as you observe this throughout the day, something begins to change in your understanding. You are not just someone who spends money, you are someone who has been trained to respond to triggers, to emotions, and to moments. And once you see that clearly, the loop doesn't disappear, but it loses some of its power because awareness is the first interruption. And today, you are finally inside that interruption. By this point of the day, something unexpected has already happened. You didn't just avoid spending, you started seeing it differently and raises a new question. If so much spending is automatic, can it actually be changed? The honest answer is not as extreme as you might think. You don't need to completely remove money from your life. You don't need to reject comfort, inconvenience, or enjoyment because the problem was never spending itself. It was the lack of awareness behind it. Most habits don't change through force, they change through interruption, and that is exactly what today has been. A simple interruption of a pattern you normally never question. When you slow down the circle just slightly, something important happens. The gap between impulse and action gets longer, even by a few seconds. And in that gap, you regain control. You start asking questions that usually never appear. Do I actually need this right now? Or am I just reacting? What am I feeling in this moment? These questions don't stop desire completely, but they change its direction. Because once you notice habit, it stops being invisible, and what is visible can be adjusted. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. You begin to see that change doesn't come from restriction, it comes from choice. From noticing patterns early enough to decide differently, even once, even occasionally, that alone is enough to shift the direction of a habit. And over time, those small moments of awareness start stacking together. Not into perfection, but into control. A different kind of relationship with spending, one where you are no longer just reacting, but choosing. And that is the real shift of this 24-hour experiment. Not saving money, not avoiding purchases, but realizing that between impulse and action, there's always a space. And in that space, you're still free to decide. 24 hours without spending money sounds simple at first, almost meaningless, but by the end of the day, it becomes something else entirely, not a challenge, not a restriction, but a mirror. Because what you saw wasn't lack of money, it was a pattern of behavior you rarely notice. You didn't stop living, you didn't lose anything essential, you only removed the automatic response that usually fills every small gap in your daily life. And in those gaps, you saw something important. How often you reach for comfort without thinking, how often boredom turns into consumption, how often emotion turns into impulse, and how quickly those impulses fade after they are satisfied. Nothing dramatic changed in the world around you, but something changed in how you use it, you see it. Because spending is no longer just a habit you follow, it is a choice you can now recognize. And once you see that clearly, you don't go back to being unaware. Not completely, not the same way. You don't stop spending, you just start seeing it, and that changes everything.